I said it's obvious that we're morally responsible.
Where in the argument does it say that?
Read me the one that you're appealing to, Justin. Say it one more time.
If determinism is true, then our acts are the consequence of laws of nature and events in the remote past. But it's not up to us what went on before we were born, and neither is it up to us what the laws of nature are. Therefore, the consequence of these things, including our present acts, are not up to us. That's Van Wagen's own words.
Yeah, and then Van Wagen, one sentence later, goes on to say, but it's obvious that we are morally responsible.
But that's not an argument. This syllogism is an argument that determinism is true, and if it's the case, if the principle of alternative possibilities is rejected, then you can't have control over things. That's what the syllogism shows. But there's no kind of good argument that says, and it's obvious that we have control over those things. It's just not an argument.
I mean, well, look, those things still constitute arguments, right? Like if you consider anything that, like you were talking about one time, that if it results in epiphenomenalism, you would consider that some type of reduction. And I mean, in the same way, I'm only suggesting the same thing. But I mean, if you want to talk about,
he's just saying he out of hand rejects the idea that this is the case.
You know, what I'm saying is, I'm saying it's possible that is the case. You know, like it really could be that way. You know, but I honestly think that what that would honestly do would just mean that nothing has ever been anyone's fault, and that would just be absurd to me.
And JonJon, that's the position you're forwarding, right?
JonJon, I wasn't paying attention. I thought he was. I thought you were debating him.
I don't know why he muted though.
This was your
JonJon's afraid. JonJon's.
I already smoked a
victory. Look,
Justin.
JonJon just like hit on a very attractive girl, and she's like, "Yeah, you seem pretty cool." And he's just trying to get out of the room fast enough before he can trip over himself. Okay?
Listen, Daniel Dennett said incompatibilism is a philosopher's fairy tale. Checkmate. No, I'm just kidding. Is that what Shamos was? I thought that's all Shamos was putting forward, was like some kind of incompatibilist argument.
I think JonJon wants this conversation to pick up between Shamos and I.
So what I'm saying is, ultimately, if JonJon is a determinist, me and him agree on incompatibilist thesis, right? We completely 100% agree that if determinism is true, right? If determinism is true, then our actions are governed by the prior state that the world is in and the laws of nature, both of which are outside of our control. Therefore, we wouldn't be morally responsible. I agree with that 100%. 100% I agree with that.
Yeah, but the problem is you agree that we're not, listen, you agree that our desires and tendencies are out.
You cut out.
I said I mean, I'm just so fucking confused here.
Muting people?
I always mute. Don't trip. I always do it. I self-mute.
You were in the middle of a sentence.
My headphones just fucking broke. My headphones just broke. I have to do it.
Yeah, like the only thing that I told Shamos, I'm like, listen, whenever you talk about moral responsibility, you're just going to have to do what the compatibilist does when he talks about free will. You're reinterpreting the concept, right? Because I'm almost positive that Shamos believes that we're not in control of our desires, and agree that he's thinking, right, whenever he talks about responsibility.
All I'm saying is philosophers that are really interested in this want to give some type of account for moral responsibility, right? The majority of philosophers are actually compatibilists. The people that want to give no account for responsibility are a super, super, super small minority. There are more libertarians than there are determinists in the literature that I've seen modernly. And so what I'm saying is, I completely agree that if determinism is true, you're not morally responsible. But most philosophers aren't interested in just stopping there. they would like to give some type of account, even if it was deflationary, right? Even if it was just account like Jack's or something like that, like a post-Strawsonian account of like reactive attitudes, you know, such as like indignation and resentment or something like that, you know. And so the vast amount of, so what I'm saying is, like, honestly, I'm not so much, if you're a determinist, right, then I don't really have a lot to offer in terms of discussion. Like, I'm more interested in talking about the compatibility, because me and the determinist agree on everything except for the existence of moral responsibility, whether or not moral responsibility exists. We agree conceptually about everything else. And so, I mean, I'm actually more interested in speaking with people who are at least compatibilists, that want to at least salvage some type of notion of moral responsibility. And so if you're one of those people, then, I mean, I kind of just agree with you on most of the points except for the last one, and we can just move on. Because, I mean, most of the philosophers are going to try to give some type of account. If you're not at all, then, I mean, you're just not you're not even worth really engaging about it.
Yeah, that's fine,
here.
right? So you step in and explain to us what you mean whenever you say moral responsibility. Like, you're just saying you're holding people accountable.
I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you this, and I'll do it. This is going to be the last time, but I will define moral responsibility. But this is the last time I'm going to do it. If you ask again, you're not going to get an answer.
Wait, who are you talking to?
JonJon.
I don't think he's here.
Oh, really?
I don't think muted.
No,
My bad. I had
Justin.
it muted.
Oh, there you go.
Go ahead. I got it now.
So how y'all doing today?
Go ahead, JonJon.
Yeah, so we agree, right, Shamos? Determinist when it comes to our biological makeup. So with that being said, what are we talking about?
No, I'm not a determinist. I said we agree conceptually about the incompatibilist thesis. So we conceptually agree that incompatibilism is the case, or likely the case.
No.
You're a determinist. You're an incompatible. I don't even want to. So I can't even shorthand the conversation because you don't even understand the term.
JonJon, he's saying that if determinism is true, then he agrees free will doesn't exist, but he doesn't think that determinism is true.
Right. And a lot of the counter examples, like arguments for compatibilism, are intuition pumps. So like you wouldn't even be able to use like Frankfurt counter examples against people that are that skeptical, because they're not going to accept the intuition pump because they've already come to the table thinking that, just moral responsibility is impossible.
That's
so you
not
could pull
true.
up one of the Well, I mean, it's true that if you're a determinist like JonJon is, and you think moral responsibility is impossible, then you're not going to accept that intuition pump. Like you might accept that it's an intuition pump. You're not going to accept.
I never said that moral responsibility is impossible.
And I suppose for someone it would change their mind. But.
I actually gave you a
You should try Frankfurt cases on JonJon. He's likely unable to respond to them.
So yeah, what I'm saying is I think he would just respond by well, I guess that's good if he's just going to presuppose his position. But so it would go something like this, JonJon. If let's say that I put you in a room, right? I could give a bunch of these. They're just like Gettier cases. There's a million of them. I put you in a room.
He doesn't know what a Gettier case is.
It's fine. Doesn't matter. So I put you in a room, JonJon, and there's door 1 and door 2, right? And so I've told you that I suppose we shouldn't form it that way. Let's suppose that you are like, what am I doing in this room? Okay. And you're like, you just want to get out of the room or something like that, right? Let's say that you go up to door number 1 open the door and you walk out of the room, right? And so, but let's just say, unbeknownst to you, that door number 2 actually is locked, right? So there's no possible world, or I won't say it like that. There's no metaphysical way in which you are leaving from door number 1. You were determined to, I mean, door number 2. You were determined to leave through door number 1. Okay, and so you didn't have the ability to choose otherwise. The only choice you could have done is leave through door number 1. And so, but still in the case of that, we would still think that you were the person that willed that choice, that was responsible for that choice. You could even frame it in terms of like a manipulation device.
Yes, of course, but not for the reasons in which I would say.
What?
Just for different reasons.
No, JonJon, I don't think you're understanding. So look, JonJon, you have the idea that it's only free will if you have the possibility of making multiple decisions, right?
Well, I would say something like, we can just go with the cookie cutter to do otherwise, right? Like,
Sure.
I think every one of you are claiming that right now. And,
Listen, that's the same
just
thing.
Insane, right?
Yeah, so look, JonJon, what about
So
this?
would you just acknowledge that every one of you that are arguing against
No, just
me
listen. I'm
are
not
just
gonna
saying
acknowledge
that you
anything
have some
say.
argument
I'm just going to give you an example.
we
that I
do
want you to
have the
respond
ability to do otherwise.
All right, so JonJon,
If
listen
it's
to
not,
this.
not that, disagree with me that you're creating new concepts. Of
JonJon,
responsibility
you're not
like
under
that.
attack yet. Don't worry. There's no problem for you. You don't have to do the not listen thing yet. So look, there's a device in your brain, and you go to a voting booth, and you can vote Republican or Democrat. The device in your brain is going to make it so that if you try to vote Democrat, it's going to override your choice and make you vote Republican, right? But let's say that you go in one day and you just happen to want to vote Democrat, right? And the device in your brain is never activated. Did you make that decision freely?
Justin,
I would say, what I would mean by that would probably be different. I would just say that there was some kind of interference from this thing, and without
It was never activated.
that interference,
because
then I
you
would
voted
place some kind of
Democrat.
arbitrary identity to my actions in voting.
So look, it was the brain implant was never activated because you decided to vote Democrat. It was never actually triggered.
Look,
If you would have tried to
let's
vote
frame it.
Republican,
Let's use the same example.
Well, yeah.
but
So I mean,
frame
if
it
I
in terms
drug
of
you
something different.
and you do something, right? That's
Not
just some
analogous.
compatibilist version of free will.
Okay,
Though.
you're misunderstanding. Let's reframe it. I can fix this so easily. Let's reframe it in terms of something that JonJon would want to do. So look, let's just reframe it. Let's say that you wake up in the morning, right? And then you have the choice to either go skateboarding or clean your room, right? And let's say that someone has planted a device in your brain, right? And let's say that if you choose to clean your room, right, then they're going to activate it to make you instead to go skateboarding, right? But if you decide to go skateboarding, they won't activate it. So they'll just let you make that decision freely on your own, okay? And let's say that you get up that morning and you decide on your own to go skateboarding, right? And he doesn't activate the device, right? But you didn't have a choice between those two things, right? You didn't have the choice. You were always going to go skateboarding. In fact, let's stipulate that if you chose anything other than go skateboarding, he would activate the device so that you would choose to go skateboarding. But let's say that you woke up that morning and you decided you wanted to go skateboarding, so he didn't have to activate the device. Did you freely choose to go skateboarding?
now JonJon, just before you answer,
No.
this is not like
Yes.
drugging because the device was never activated. When someone drugs you, they're
Listen, I
actively
said no.
changing your brain chemistry, right? In this case, nothing was altered.
The answer is no,
Now
So you didn't
explain
freely
why.
vote.
because he's saying, "Did you?" I quote, "freely make that decision?"
Mhm.
The answer is no.
Why?
You say free, I just think you're talking about some kind of like freedom, like
What wasn't
the
free
idea
about
that
it?
you can choose otherwise, right? That's the definition that we all agreed on. That you guys are just advocating for the ability to do otherwise, which it's just unwarranted. And this example you're given,
I
like
don't think
whenever you
JonJon's
say,
gonna
"Oh, can you choose?"
understand the example.
It's no. The answer is no, right? And I think that it's a, terrible analogy. It's not pragmatic, right?
Well, I think if you don't
Because
understand
saying
it,
that, oh, what if this guy has, I could. That's why I said it. Yeah, if I give you some drugs and you do some.
I already pointed out how that's not analogous. This one may be above your pay grade, JonJon.
Your brain hasn't been
No.
manipulated in this. It was only going
You're
to
just
be
giving.
if you chose not skateboarding. But in fact, you were lucky
Listen,
enough to choose to go.
Why are you
skateboarding,
guys
so you never
advocating
had
for the
manipulate
ability
your
to
brain.
choose otherwise?
Well, look, what's interesting is about this. I'll say this to Justin. What's interesting about this is some people think that the Frankfurt examples are very intuitive, and they obviously have force behind them, right? But there are other arguments, like one that Van Inwagen uses, that shows you that, in fact, like some principle, like the ability to do otherwise, is in fact necessary for free will. And I can give one of those analogies. And both of these analogies combined together, and the fact that they both seem intuitive, is actually what is the standard problem of free will. And so I'll give you that one. So let's say that you have a person, we'll just call her Jill. And let's say that Jill has told a lie to you, right? Or has lied. And you're a staunch moralist, right? And so you say to Jill, you ought not have lied, right? And let's say Jill says to you, look, I realize that I ought not have lied, but every time I drink alcohol, I just turn into a pathological liar. And it's beyond my control after I've started drinking. Now, let's say that I say to Jill, well, Jill, you shouldn't have put yourself in the position in which you would have been susceptible to take drink, right? And what if Jill replies back and says something like, look, I realize that I should not have lied. I realize that I should not have drank. And I also realize that I should not have put myself in a position that made me susceptible to drink, since it's outside of my control once I do. And let's say that Jill replies, but however, I actually, due to epistemic unforeseeable reasons, had no expectation to think that the situation that I was going to be in would be a situation in which I was presented drink. Okay? And let's say that at that point, most people see it very intuitive that we don't hold her responsible anymore, because it was outside of her control, and she didn't have the ability to choose otherwise. She went into a circumstance, right? She knows that she shouldn't drink. She knows that she shouldn't lie. She knows that she shouldn't put herself in positions where she would drink and which would cause her to lie. And she tries to avoid those situations. And yet there was one situation which is which she had a reasonable expectation to think that she would not have been presented drink, and due to some limitations in her fallibleness or epistemic whatever, she actually was wrong and was presented that situation. Now we would say that it's not her. She's not at fault for that, for lying at least, right? And so that it should have some intuitive force for you, and that just shows you that the reason why we don't think she's responsible is because she didn't have the ability to do otherwise, and that's a strong intuitive pump for why you should believe that the ability to do otherwise is connected with moral responsibility. Do you understand what I said?
So the only thing that I think is relevant, the only thing is worth talking about here is obviously if just to give another example, apart from the one I gave earlier, in this scenario, if we was to rewind time and then replay it, the same thing would happen every time, and I think you would agree. So with that being said, there is no freedom in any of this situation, right? You're just throwing that in there. You're saying, well, here, this bitch had some freedom somehow, or she didn't have the freedom, right? You're saying the opposite. You're saying, well, we don't hold her responsible for the freedom. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous, right?
Wow, JonJon, what a good.
Hold people responsible for things outside of their control.
What did JonJon say?
Guys, that was clever of JonJon, wasn't it?
What did he say?
Look, he's trying to distinguish between the Frankfurt, you could not have done otherwise, and rewinding the clock to the beginning of the universe, you're going to do the same thing every time sense in which you could not have done otherwise. And actually, I think that's a standard response to the Frankfurt case bullshit. And that was real. That JonJon doesn't even know that, though. He just came up with it himself. And I think JonJon is praiseworthy for being so clever.
He's heard us talk.
Can someone else say the objection again?
We've said that in here a million times.
Shamos, are you gonna respond?
See, I think that they're just conceptual things. So he was actually begging the question, godless, because the Frankfurt example is saying there's the conceivable notions in which it's determined, yet you're still morally responsible. An example that I just gave is there's conceivable examples in which you don't have the ability to do otherwise. In virtue of that, you're not morally responsible.
Yeah, Frankfurt cases accept the idea of a thing being determined. The
Look,
point is,
all I'm
even though it's
saying is
determined,
that
we
it
still
was
count it as
clever.
free will.
Look, I'm not saying the JonJon's objection works. I'm just saying it was clever.
It's clever to pose a thing that doesn't work.
I don't think that JonJon was wrong, because in saying that it's still an issue for libertarians, because the rewinding the clock thing, there's a question there, right? And the question is, in virtue of what is it the case that it's always going to be the same? And if it's because there's a deterministic model going on, then I don't see how it's not a causal series of events, right? And so that's incompatible with libertarianism. You can't be caused to do those
that's
things.
exactly what I said. I said, listen, it's whenever I said it's fucking ridiculous twice, I was just saying that because he's throwing him into this scenario, which is ridiculous. If we're just acknowledging that if we rewind the time and then play it back 1,000 fucking times, the same shit's gonna happen, and you're just gonna want to talk about, well, this person wasn't responsible. She wasn't morally responsible because she didn't decide this, so she had the ability to do otherwise. You're in Fallout Land. You're going completely off the rails.
Do you think that true propositions about the past are now necessary? That true propositions about the past are necessary in the present?
Fuck.
Let's not go there, though. Krill, I appreciate it, but because that's going to take us down a different road, and we're trying to nail this thing down.
Yeah, so the issue
was
here
wrong,
is
but
that
don't
you're
you think-
using freedom, right, in a very weird way, to say the least.
Shamos, wasn't it clever of JonJon, at least, even if it doesn't work?
No, he's repeating something he's heard a million times. Jesus God.
Listen, I just want Shamos to
I don't
fucking
think
respond.
JonJon's
Right?
ever heard the
Like,
Frankfurt.
can you just explain to me why freedom is warranted in this concept here?
GG, let's just let Shamos and JonJon hash it out.
I don't think it needs to be a conversation between Shamos and JonJon. In fact, I really don't want it to just turn into that.
All right, you've got him, JonJon. Shamos accuses other people of running when they won't have a conversation with them.
No, I'm not saying that I don't
you
want
got
to
your
have
ass
a
smashed. Settle
conversation.
down. You don't want to talk to him about it? You're running, right, faggot? Right, faggot? You're just
JonJon,
running, you fucking
but I don't
faggot.
wanna
He got
have a
you on question
conversation
begging and he
with just
dismantled your
JonJon.
Frankfurt shit. Keep smashing his ass, JonJon. He's running. Anybody that doesn't want to talk fucking ever is running, right?
Oh,
Justin, are you saying that he has a choice in the situation of skating?
Yeah.
Room?
Shamos, why won't you engage JonJon, pussy?
No, I
He's
want to
scared
engage
of me,
JonJon.
man.
I just don't want
now
to
you won't.
engage
All right,
only
JonJon, go ahead.
I've smashed Shamos many times.
JonJon says he doesn't have a choice. You guys say he does have a choice, right? Yay, nay?
Yeah, so
this is what Shamos does, though. When he gets into a conversation he hasn't prepared for, he just dishonestly runs away.
No,
yeah,
I'm
so
not-
basically what happened, right?
conversation.
Go ahead, give us the
Listen.
recap, JonJon. To the victor go the spoils.
All that happened, I caught Shamos talking about things like moral responsibility, things like that, and him to acknowledge things like determinism in terms of our biology, that we're not in control of shit, and that even though I got him to acknowledge that for the most part, he still wants to insert some weird concept of freedom in this deterministic world, right? That's why I brought up the time thing, thinking that would be like the thing that he would wake up to, but it didn't work. Like if we rewind time and then replay, the same thing's going to happen 1,000 times. I think he acknowledges this, but still, like the only thing I want from him is just for him to acknowledge and then tell me what he means whenever he's holding people responsible. Because
John,
he's just saying
look
freedom.
at the chat real quick.
That's all I'm getting from him is just freedom. Like, oh, this person had the ability to watch. Well, there's no argument for that.
JonJon, just check out the chat real quick. Crickets? Nothing, JonJon, really?
Wow, way to kill the room, Seth.
He's a blind skater. I mean, I clicked on it, but it's taking forever to pop up. Is it just a picture?
No, it's animated.
So, JonJon, do you think you won this discussion or what?
I think that I did a terrible job at trying to convey my issue. Like I said, I just want, like, it's similar to what a compatibilist does, similar to an issue I would take with the compatibilist, right? Is that he uses the word free will and his new definition of freedom because, you know, for the most part, a compatibilist is somebody finding a middle ground between determinism and free will. So, I mean, it all boils down to this idea, this philosophy of identity, how we choose to identify with our biological makeup and like that. But it's all determined.
I mean,
So
if
the
you're a
compatibilist
determinist and you
is
bite the
creating
bullet on
a
moral
new
responsibility,
definition
then I
of
really
free will.
don't have any arguments
Hold
to
on.
give.
So I'm just saying, this is my issue, right? The compatibilist would be creating a new definition of free will, to say the least. You would subscribe to it because of practicality, for pretty much, because it would align with most of our values. But that's all I'm trying to get at. Whenever he's using responsibility, whenever he's throwing that word around, I think it's very similar to whenever a compatibilist throws around free will. Because whenever the word free implies freedom. And so basically the ability to choose otherwise. So that's a semantic issue, right? For the most part.
Yeah, I haven't really read any literature at all. Like most of the stuff is focused between compatibilists and libertarians, and I've never really heard people try to render arguments against determinists other than like empirical arguments or something like that. Like I've never, I mean, one empirical and determinists that are willing to just bite the bullet on moral responsibility, I don't really know what to say to them. Like well, I've never
listen,
read
it's
anything.
very simple. It's very simple. You're
So
making a positive claim. You're saying that we have the ability. You can't prove that. You have no argument for that.
No, I
think
gave a
Christopher Hitchens
conceptual
said
argument.
best, right?
I gave a conceptual argument that had an intuition pump. Well, I gave an argument. I gave an argument though.
No, you agreed with everything in terms of
No, I gave an argument. You listen to me.
Like,
I
you're
gave
just
an
a
argument that
fucking
the ability
hypocrite
to
within
do
your own reasoning.
otherwise. Okay, you're not listening. I gave an argument that moral responsibility presupposes the ability to do otherwise. I gave that argument. I rendered it right in front of your face.
No, that's just begging the question. That's all you did.
What do you mean by otherwise in this situation?
It's an intuition pump, obviously. If that's what you mean when you say question begging.
How can you have an intuition that something incoherent is true?
Yeah.
Intuitions are irrational.
like,
So that
if we're gonna
is-
say that
Mhm.
we're not in control of our is this determined, then we're gonna say something like, well, I choose to identify with that determined biological makeup in such a way that I identify with these actions. And then, the compatibilists will give a cookie cutter example, like being pushed off a diving board, for example. Oh, well, versus whether or not I get pushed into the pool, my biological makeup kind of made that decision. Choose to view all of these things in such a way that has nothing to do with the ability to choose otherwise. Right? Knowledge of that?